Officer David Miller, a name synonymous with unwavering dedication within the small, tight-knit community nestled in the heart of America, stood by his partner, Rex. Rex, a magnificent German shepherd whose very presence exuded strength and discipline, was more than just a police dog. He was half of a legendary K9 team, renowned throughout the county for their impeccable service. For 5 years, they had been inseparable, moving as one formidable unit, their bond a silent testament to countless hours of training, shared dangers, and mutual trust. Rex, with his intelligent eyes and powerful physique, was a picture of canine perfection, an animal whose every action was precise, purposeful, and brimming with an almost infectious energy. He was the kind of dog that inspired confidence, a furry guardian whose loyalty was absolute. Yet, a shadow had fallen over this perfect partnership. Rex had stopped eating. Not gradually, not pickily, but abruptly and completely. His food bowl, once emptied with enthusiastic gusto, now sat untouched, its contents growing stale. This sudden, inexplicable refusal was deeply unsettling. For a dog like Rex, whose routine was as rigid as a military cadet's, and whose appetite was legendary, this behavior was not just unusual. It was a profound alarm bell ringing loudly in David's ears. Rex, the epitome of a disciplined working animal, was exhibiting a vulnerability David had never witnessed. His once bright, inquisitive gaze had dulled, replaced by a distant, almost melancholic stare. His tail, usually a blur of motion, now lay still, a heavy appendage devoid of its usual joyous wag. David, a man whose life revolved around structure and solving puzzles, found himself in uncharted territory. He was a seasoned officer, respected by his peers and beloved by the townsfolk for his calm demeanor and unwavering commitment to public safety. Married for over a decade, with 2 children who adored their furry, 4-legged uncle, David's life was orderly, predictable, and profoundly enriched by his partnership with Rex. He remembered the day Rex had first arrived, a boisterous, floppy-eared puppy full of boundless potential. Together, they had navigated grueling training courses, apprehended suspects, searched for missing persons, and provided comfort in moments of crisis. Their connection transcended mere handler and dog. It was a powerful, almost telepathic understanding, a silent language spoken between 2 souls. Rex wasn't just a tool for law enforcement. He was family, a loyal companion, a furry shadow, and an extension of David himself. Now, Rex's health was deteriorating with alarming speed. Despite David's countless attempts, offering every type of kibble, wet food, and even gourmet human treats, Rex remained unresponsive. The department's veterinarian, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a kind-faced woman with years of experience with K9 units, had run every test imaginable. Blood panels, X-rays, ultrasounds, all came back clear. There was no physical ailment, no discernible medical cause for the sudden onset of anorexia. The mystery deepened with each passing day, casting a long, dark shadow over the precinct. Rex, once a beacon of vitality, was fading, his vibrant spirit slowly dimming, replaced by a profound listlessness that terrified David more than any dangerous encounter on the job ever had. Dr. Rodriguez could only suggest psychological distress, a vague explanation that offered little comfort or direction. The thought of Rex suffering silently wasting away gnawed at David's soul. He felt a helplessness he rarely experienced, a gnawing fear that he was failing his best friend. He couldn't articulate why this was happening, and that lack of understanding was a heavy burden. The police department, usually a hive of activity, now had a palpable sense of concern hanging in the air. all focused on the once indomitable K9. As David watched Rex, lying quietly in his kennel, his once muscular body growing gaunt, he knew he had to dig deeper to find a solution, no matter how unconventional. The clock was ticking, and the fate of his beloved partner hung in the balance. If you're captivated by stories of resilience, unexpected heroes, and the profound bonds between humans and animals, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Officer Miller's desperation grew with each passing day. He meticulously prepared Rex's favorite kibble, adding tempting morsels of roasted chicken and savory beef, only to watch it remain untouched. He bought new squeaky toys, bright red balls, anything that might pique the German Shepherd's interest, but Rex merely observed them with dull, distant eyes. In a desperate attempt to rekindle the familiar spark, David even brought Rex home, hoping the comfort of his own house, the familiar scent of his family, and the absence of the sterile kennel environment would provide some solace. He laid Rex's favorite blanket by the fireplace, talked to him in soothing tones, and spent hours just sitting by his side, gently stroking his thick fur. Yet, the once vibrant, energetic K9 partner remained withdrawn, his gaze fixed on some unseen point, his spirit clearly elsewhere. The department's veterinarian, Dr. Albright, a kind woman with decades of experience, was equally baffled. After exhaustive tests and consultations with canine specialists, she could find no physical ailment. "David," she'd said, her voice filled with sympathy, "all signs point to psychological distress. We just don't know what caused it or how to reach him." The unknown ailment, the invisible wound, was far more terrifying than any broken bone or treatable infection. The helplessness gnawed at David, leaving him with a hollow ache in his chest. Then came the meeting, a summons to the chief's office that David dreaded. The decision had been brewing, a painful inevitability that hung heavy in the air. The chief, a man David deeply respected, sat behind his imposing desk, his expression grim. "Officer Miller," he began, his voice laced with regret, "we've reviewed Rex's case extensively. Given his declining health, his inability to perform duties, and the lack of a clear prognosis, the department is considering early retirement for Rex." The words struck David like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. Early retirement. It wasn't just a dog being retired, it was his partner, his shadow, a part of his very soul. For 5 years, Rex had been more than an animal. He was family, an extension of David himself. To think of Rex, active and proud, spending his days languishing, unable to serve, was heartbreaking. The department discussed the legal and ethical considerations of K9 retirement, the protocols for care, the financial implications. David heard the words, but they seemed to float around him, abstract and meaningless in the face of his personal devastation. He knew the rules, understood the necessity of a fully capable K9 unit, but his heart refused to accept it. Sleepless nights became his new reality. David immersed himself in research, devouring every article on canine psychology, trauma in service dogs, and alternative therapies. He contacted renowned K9 behaviorists across the country, describing Rex's symptoms in agonizing detail, hoping for a glimmer of insight. He even reached out to former handlers, men who had seen their partners through incredible challenges, seeking any counsel they could offer. Each conversation, each new avenue explored, ended in a dead end. The frustration mounted, a relentless tide threatening to engulf him. He tried everything anyone suggested, different brands of specialized food, aromatherapy, even gentle music playing constantly in Rex's kennel. Nothing worked. His heartbreak deepened, a growing despair that he was failing his best friend, his loyal partner, in his greatest hour of need. The conventional world had no answers for Rex, and David felt himself running out of time. Rex's condition worsened dramatically with each passing day. The once vibrant, muscular German shepherd now appeared gaunt, his ribs starkly visible beneath his dulling coat. His eyes, usually bright and alert, were sunken and listless, barely acknowledging David's presence. He lay curled in his kennel, a picture of profound despair, barely moving even when coaxed with his favorite toys or the scent of a sizzling steak. His weight plummeted, and the department, seeing his rapid decline, set a stark deadline. A decision on Rex's future would be made by the end of the week. David felt an immense, crushing weight of pressure and guilt. He chastised himself endlessly, believing he had somehow failed his loyal partner, that there was a piece of the puzzle he was missing, and time was running out. The thought of Rex, a dog who had served with such distinction, being forced into an early, ignominious retirement, or worse, put down, tore at his very soul. The news of Rex's plight, initially confined to the precinct, soon leaked to the local media. A compassionate reporter, touched by the story of the ailing police dog, ran a segment on the evening news. The broadcast, highlighting Rex's unwavering service and his sudden mysterious illness, resonated deeply with the community. David's phone began to ring incessantly, his inbox overflowing with messages of sympathy and concern. People shared their own stories of beloved pets, offered home remedies, spiritual cures, and even outlandish theories. Most were well-meaning, if unhelpful, but the sheer volume was overwhelming. Amidst the flurry of messages, one particular email stood out. It was short, written in a child's uncertain hand, likely typed by a parent. It came from a girl named Lily, who claimed to be 8 years old. The subject line simply read, "I know why Rex isn't eating." David found himself staring at the screen, a flicker of something beyond skepticism catching his attention. The email stated, with surprising conviction for a child, that Rex wasn't sick in the way adults thought. Lily insisted that she needed to speak to him directly, that she could help. His initial reaction was to dismiss it, another well-intentioned but ultimately naive suggestion from a child who probably loved dogs. He was an officer, a professional handler, and he had consulted experts. What could an 8-year-old possibly know? But desperation, as they say, breeds strange alliances. He had exhausted every logical, medical, and behavioral avenue. Rex was fading fast, and the deadline loomed like a dark cloud. The vet had admitted they were out of options, suggesting palliative care. There was a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor in Lily's message, a quiet certainty that piqued David's interest despite himself. What if, just what if, she saw something, sensed something that seasoned professionals had overlooked? Children, after all, often perceived the world through a lens uncluttered by adult assumptions. He pictured Rex, now barely lifting his head, and a sudden, irrational urgency seized him. What did he have to lose? He had tried everything else. Swallowing his pride and his deeply ingrained skepticism, David decided to respond to the email. He would meet Lily. At this point, any thread of hope, no matter how fragile or unconventional, was worth grasping. The life of his partner, his friend, depended on it. David, with gnawing anxiety and a flicker of irrational hope, agreed to the meeting. He arranged for Lily and her mother to visit the police station discreetly, avoiding the media frenzy that had begun to swirl around Rex's condition. When they arrived, David was struck by Lily's demeanor. She wasn't boisterous or overly confident as some children her age could be. Instead, She was quiet, almost ethereal, with large, observant eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the sterile environment. Her affinity for animals was evident even in her stillness. There was a gentle empathy radiating from her. She spoke softly, almost apologetically, as her mother introduced her. Lily lived on the outskirts of town, and David vaguely recalled seeing her at a few community outreach events where Rex had performed demonstrations, always standing a little apart from the other children, watching Rex with an intense, quiet focus. "Rex isn't sick, Officer Miller," Lily stated, her voice a reedy whisper that somehow pierced through David's skepticism. "He's sad and worried." David raised an eyebrow, about to interject with the veterinarian's extensive reports, but Lily continued, her gaze unwavering. "I saw something. A few weeks ago, when you were helping with that situation near the old warehouse." She paused, searching for the right words. "There was a lot of yelling, and then a really loud bang, like a giant firecracker. Rex was searching, and he jumped. He looked scared, like a small puppy, not a big police dog." David's mind raced back. The old warehouse. Yes, a volatile situation involving a suspect who had barricaded himself inside. Rex had been deployed to search the perimeter. There had been a lot of chaotic noise, sirens, shouting, and yes, a sudden sharp explosion from what was later identified as a discarded firecracker, set off by a mischievous teenager lurking nearby, completely unrelated to the police operation. In the heat of the moment, David had barely registered Rex's momentary flinch, attributing it to the general tension. How could an 8-year-old child have noticed such a fleeting detail, overlooked by himself and a team of seasoned officers? Yet her description was uncannily accurate. He remembered Rex had paused, his ears flattening for a split second, then quickly regained his composure and continued the search. David had thought nothing of it, a natural reaction to a loud, unexpected sound. But now, through Lily's eyes, it suddenly seemed significant. "He didn't just jump," Lily clarified, her brow furrowed with concern. "He looked confused, like he didn't understand what happened, like he thought he did something wrong, or the loud noise was his fault." Her innocent interpretation, imbued with a child's unfiltered understanding of emotion, resonated with an uncomfortable truth in David's gut. Could Rex have internalized that moment of startling fear, that momentary disorientation, as a failure, a breach of his own incredible courage and training? Swallowing hard, David decided to trust this improbable intuition. He led Lily and her mother to the quiet kennel area where Rex was housed, away from the main activity of the precinct. Rex lay curled on his blanket, his once bright eyes dull and distant. He hardly stirred as David knelt beside him, offering a gentle word. His tail, usually a vibrant metronome of affection, remained still. David felt a familiar pang of despair. He doubted Rex would even acknowledge a stranger. But as Lily quietly approached, a small, almost imperceptible shift occurred. Rex's ears twitched. His head lifted just a fraction of an inch. His gaze, though still clouded, seemed to track her movement. Lily, without hesitation, knelt down a few feet from him, her movements slow and deliberate, no sudden gestures. She extended a small, open hand, not reaching out to touch him yet, but merely offering her presence. Rex, usually aloof and uninterested in his current state, showed a flicker of curiosity, a tiny spark in his weary eyes, as Lily began to speak to him in a voice softer than a whisper, a soothing murmur that seemed to fill the heavy air around them. David, despite his lingering reservations, had indeed arranged the meeting. He found himself standing awkwardly in the precinct's quiet kennel area, a place usually bustling but now hushed in deference to Rex's fragile state. Lily arrived with her mother, a woman who looked equally perplexed by her daughter's insistence, but had clearly learned to trust her quiet child's unusual instincts. Lily herself was not what David expected. She wasn't boisterous or overly eager. She was composed, almost solemn, her large, observant eyes taking in everything around her. She didn't rush towards Rex, but approached with a gentle deference, as if understanding the delicate balance of the moment. Rex, usually oblivious to strangers in his current state, stirred slightly as Lily drew near, a faint, almost imperceptible twitch of his ear. Lily knelt beside Rex, her small hand reaching out slowly, deliberately, towards his matted fur. David watched, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach, anticipating Rex's usual disinterest, or worse, a warning growl. But Rex merely shifted, his eyes, dull for so long, fixating on the small girl. Lily began to pet him, stroking his head with feathery lightness, her touch surprisingly confident. And then she began to whisper. David couldn't make out the exact words. They were too soft, too intimately spoken, but the tone was one of profound comfort, a soothing murmur that seemed to wash over the ailing dog. As she spoke, Rex gave a soft, almost imperceptible whine, a sound David hadn't heard from him in weeks. His posture, usually slumped and defeated, seemed to subtly unfurl, his body relaxing incrementally beneath Lily's gentle touch. It was a change so minute, yet so profound, that David felt a shiver run down his spine. What Lily revealed next, spoken not to Rex but to David in a calm, clear voice after her whispered exchange, sent a jolt of understanding through the officer. She explained what she had seen that fateful day, the day Rex had seemingly lost his spirit. It wasn't during a high-stakes takedown or a dangerous pursuit, but rather in the aftermath, when the immediate threat had seemingly passed. While David and his fellow officers were securing the perimeter after apprehending a suspect, a firecracker set off by a group of mischievous teenagers hiding nearby had suddenly exploded with a deafening crack. It had been brief, unexpected, and largely unnoticed by the human officers who were focused on the task at hand. But Rex, with his heightened senses, had been right next to it. Lily described how Rex had flinched violently, a deep, guttural bark of surprise escaping him, not of aggression. He had stumbled, clearly disoriented, looking around with wide, confused eyes, as if the very ground had betrayed him. It was a fleeting moment, quickly overshadowed by the ongoing police activity, but Lily, from her perch across the street, had seen the fear flash in his eyes. She understood, with an intuitive empathy that defied her years, that it wasn't the danger of the operation that had broken Rex, but the unexpected, jarring assault on his senses, a moment of profound vulnerability where his trust in his own formidable abilities had been shaken. He hadn't failed in his duty. He had simply been deeply startled, and that brief moment of sensory overload had impacted his innate sense of security, making him feel betrayed by the world he was trained to protect. After Lily finished her soft revelation, she looked back at Rex, her gaze unwavering. She whispered a few more words, then gently withdrew her hand. To David's utter astonishment, Rex, who had ignored his food bowl for what felt like an eternity, slowly, tentatively, nudged his nose into Lily's outstretched hand, a gesture of almost desperate seeking. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement that spoke volumes, he pushed himself up, his limbs still stiff, and ambled towards the food bowl, which sat forlornly in the corner of his kennel. He sniffed it, a long, investigative sniff, then looked up at Lily, as if seeking permission. Lily nodded, a gentle smile gracing her lips. And then Rex lowered his head. He took a small, hesitant bite. David stood frozen, his breath catching in his throat, a tidal wave of disbelief and overwhelming hope washing over him. Rex nudged the food bowl again with his nose, a slow, deliberate motion that seemed to weigh heavily on his emaciated frame. David, holding his breath, watched with an intensity that bordered on pain, his eyes fixed on every minute twitch of Rex's whiskers. Lily remained kneeling beside the German shepherd, her hand resting gently on his once powerful shoulder, her small figure radiating a quiet, steadfast encouragement. Then, almost imperceptibly, Rex lowered his head. He took a small, hesitant sniff, then a tiny, almost symbolic bite of the kibble that had sat untouched for days. The sound of Rex chewing, a soft, dry crunch, was the most beautiful sound David had heard in weeks. It was barely a mouthful, but it was a mouthful nonetheless. Lily's eyes, wide with a mixture of hope and relief, met David's. A silent, profound understanding passed between them. It was a victory, undeniably small in its physical manifestation, yet monumental in its emotional resonance. David felt a wave of dizzying relief wash over him, so potent it almost buckled his knees. Gratitude, raw and overwhelming, welled up inside him. Gratitude for this child, for this unexpected, inexplicable moment of grace. As Rex took another, slightly larger bite, a clarity settled over David. The vet had been right about psychological distress, but they had all been looking in the wrong places, searching for a complex trauma that mirrored human emotions, or an environmental trigger they could quantify. Rex's refusal to eat wasn't a physical ailment, nor was it a simple behavioral issue that could be corrected with conventional training. It was a deeply personal, almost existential fear, a blow to his sense of security that manifested as a complete withdrawal from life itself. He realized now that all their scientific tests, all their thorough examinations, had missed the fundamental truth staring them in the face. Rex needed emotional reassurance, not medication or changes in diet. He needed understanding that transcended typical K9 protocols, a gentle, intuitive connection that Lily had provided without effort. This realization struck David with the force of a physical blow. He, a seasoned K9 handler, a man who prided himself on his bond with his partner, had been so focused on empirical evidence, on what he could see and measure, that he had overlooked the invisible wound. Lily, with her innocent perspective, her uncluttered mind, and her genuine, untainted empathy for animals, had seen the truth. She hadn't approached Rex with a medical chart or a behavioral assessment tool. She had approached him with kindness, with a quiet understanding that bypassed the usual barriers. She had listened, not just with her ears, but with her heart, to a creature that couldn't articulate its pain in human words. It was a humbling lesson. All the trained professionals, the countless hours of research, the various specialists David had consulted, had failed. They had operated within the confines of established knowledge, trying to fit Rex's problem into a neat diagnostic box. But Lily, a child with no formal training, had intuitively understood that Rex's distress stemmed from a profound emotional response to a moment of vulnerability he experienced. Her simple act of whispering comforting words, of validating his fear, had unlocked the emotional block that no amount of food or medical intervention could touch. Her empathy had been the key, a pure, unbiased connection that reached across the species barrier and touched Rex's deepest, most hidden pain. David knew with absolute certainty that he was witnessing a miracle forged in the purest form of compassion. Rex continued to eat, slowly but steadily, each crunch a testament to Lily's extraordinary insight and the profound power of human-animal connection. Over the next few days, the change in Rex was nothing short of miraculous. With Lily's continued presence and her soft, encouraging words, his appetite returned fully, as if a dam had burst within him. The food bowl, once an object of complete indifference, now held a renewed sense of interest. Each meal saw him consume a little more, each bite a step further away from the brink of despair. That leaden lethargy that had cloaked him for weeks began to lift, replaced by a nascent spark of his former self. His eyes, once dull and distant, regained their customary alertness, tracking movements, responding to sounds. He started to move with more purpose, the stiffness in his limbs giving way to a more fluid, confident gait. The playful spirit that David had feared was lost forever began to re-emerge, first as a tentative tail wag, then a soft nudge for a head scratch, gradually building to exuberant romps in the yard. David, ever the meticulous handler, began to implement new training techniques, subtly woven into Rex's daily routine. He focused specifically on desensitization to unexpected sounds, using controlled, low-level noises that gradually escalated in intensity. He introduced positive reinforcement every time Rex showed resilience, building his confidence not just in his abilities, but in his own emotional fortitude. It was a painstaking process, requiring immense patience and understanding, but the results were undeniable. Rex was not just recovering physically, he was rebuilding his shattered psychological framework, piece by careful piece. A unique and beautiful friendship blossomed between Rex and Lily, one that transcended their species and their ages. Lily became his special therapist, her visits a cherished highlight in Rex's day. Her mere presence had a calming influence, a soothing balm for his still recovering psyche. Rex, once wary and withdrawn, would greet her with an excited whimper and a wagging tail, nudging into her hand for affection. He looked forward to her visits with an eagerness that mirrored his former zest for life, and she, in turn, took immense pride in his progress, her small hand stroking his fur as she recounted his improvements to David. It was a bond built on trust, empathy, and an unspoken understanding that bypassed the complexities of human communication. The extraordinary story of Lily and Rex, initially a quiet triumph within their small circle, gradually spread throughout the town. It began with whispers, then local news reports, eventually becoming a heartwarming testament to the power of kindness and the potential for unconventional solutions. The community, initially sympathetic to the plight of their beloved police dog, now rallied around Lily, hailing her as a local hero. Children at school looked at her with awe, and adults stopped her parents in the grocery store to express their admiration. David, his heart overflowing with a mixture of relief and profound gratitude, expressed his sincere thanks publicly, acknowledging that Lily's intuitive understanding had succeeded where all their expertise had failed. He spoke of her with reverence, emphasizing that her simple, pure-hearted act of empathy had saved his partner's life, and, in doing so, had offered a powerful lesson to them all. The town, accustomed to the steadfast presence of Officer Miller and his K-9 partner, now had a new, unlikely champion in young Lily, whose quiet courage and deep compassion had brought Rex back from the brink. Rex's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. His appetite fully returned, his lean frame slowly filling out, muscle tone building back to its former strength. David, observing every subtle change, felt a profound relief that transcended his professional role. He saw his partner, his friend, being pulled back from the brink. The new training protocols David implemented were subtle but impactful, designed to desensitize Rex to sudden, sharp noises, especially those mimicking the firecracker incident. They focused on positive reinforcement, associating unexpected sounds with rewards and comfort, gradually rebuilding Rex's trust in his environment and himself. This approach didn't just retrain a police dog, it healed a wounded soul. The unique bond between Rex and Lily blossomed into something truly special. Lily became an unofficial member of their unit, her visits to the K9 facility a highlight for everyone, especially Rex. He would greet her with an enthusiastic tail wag, a low rumble of contentment, a stark contrast to his earlier withdrawn demeanor. Her presence was a calming anchor, a constant reminder of the empathy that had saved him. David often found them sitting together, Lily softly murmuring to Rex, explaining her day, or simply sharing quiet moments. And in those interactions, David saw a tangible peace settle over his partner. Lily, in turn, found a steadfast, furry confidant in Rex, someone who listened without judgment and offered unconditional affection. News of Rex's extraordinary recovery and the unconventional role of a young girl in it spread quickly through the small town. The local newspaper, which had initially highlighted Rex's plight, now ran a heartwarming follow-up story, complete with a picture of Lily gently petting a fully recovered Rex. Lily became a local hero, a symbol of the town's compassionate spirit. People stopped her parents in the grocery store to offer their congratulations, praising her gentle heart and intuitive wisdom. David, whenever asked, spoke glowingly of Lily, publicly acknowledging her indispensable contribution and crediting her with Rex's return to health. He expressed his profound gratitude, not just with words, but with a deep, unwavering respect for her unique gift. Finally, the day came for Rex's reinstatement. After thorough evaluations confirming his complete physical and psychological recovery, and with the new emotional well-being protocols firmly in place, Rex was cleared for active duty. The police department, once on the verge of retiring him, now celebrated his return, recognizing the invaluable service he provided. David and Rex resumed their patrols, a partnership now stronger, forged in adversity and deepened by an almost mystical understanding born from Rex's harrowing experience and Lily's intervention. David carried a new perspective too, a heightened awareness of the subtle emotional landscape of his partner, an understanding that went beyond mere commands and responses. The story ends with Rex, fully healthy, his coat gleaming, his eyes bright with intelligence and eagerness, back on the beat. He's the same diligent, courageous police dog, but with an added layer of wisdom, a quiet dignity earned through suffering and healing. Occasionally, during community outreach events or school visits, Lily would be there, a small, unassuming figure, often just standing quietly beside Rex. He would lean into her touch, a silent acknowledgement of their shared history, a testament to the profound bond that saved him. Their story became a living lesson, whispered through the town like a gentle breeze, that sometimes the most intricate, perplexing problems don't require complex solutions or advanced science. Instead, they demand the simplest, purest form of empathy, a connection born from an open heart and an intuitive spirit. It taught everyone that the bond between humans and animals is not merely one of ownership or utility, but a deep, reciprocal connection capable of profound healing, a potent force that could mend even the most hidden wounds and restore a spirit that had almost been lost. It was a beautiful, enduring testament to compassion in its purest form.